Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and thanks for hanging out with me in Brian's and my hotel room. We are traveling back across the country to Texas to see Brian's mom and our newest grandbaby. That's our sixth grandchild before we fly to Ecuador. So lots of travel. I'm actually really excited today to highlight chapter 13 of Outshining Trauma by Ralph De La Rosa. And this one is really fantastic because Ralph in this book is really trying to integrate what he learned from Buddhist meditation practice and internal family systems. And in this one, he uses a practice that you all might be familiar with. It's very widely known called Lovingkindness Meditation. And he teaches you how to do that in the traditional form, and then also applies it to our inner family, which is just such a beautiful integration of practices. And just I find it so life-giving. I practiced it yesterday in preparation for this video, and I will guide you through some of it so you can practice it if you would like to and just test it out. Everything is always an experiment, right? You're always providing an experiment for your parts, for your inner family to see if it's life-giving, right? If it helps you feel more healthy, more peace, more joy, more love, more connectedness, right? Or not, right? So you don't ever have to adopt something. If you notice that parts of you resist it or they have certain struggles with it, just go toward those parts and see, get curious if you can about why and what their concerns are or what kind of blocks the way for them. All right. So before I lead you in the practice, I just want to tell you some highlights from the chapter because it was just such a great chapter. And it starts actually with a quote from Nick Cave from, I guess, a book called The Red Hand Files, which I'm not familiar with, but I really loved this quote. It says, "There's barely any distance between a feeling of neutrality toward the world and a crucial love for it. Barely any distance at all. All that is required to move from indifference to love is to have our hearts broken. The heart breaks and the world explodes in front of us as a revelation." And so at the time that I am making this video, a couple days ago, I believe it was, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, bombed Iran. And um, I have all kinds of parts that have struggled with Trump as a person. And then there's all kinds of things going on in the world where people are being oppressed, killed. There's just such conflict. There's us and them and black and white and they're dangerous, whether it's between the Ukraine and Russia or Israel and Palestine or in the US Democrats and Republicans or Christians and Muslims or you know whatever it may be. There's so much conflict, so much fighting, so much and it's very easy for me and my parts as well to point fingers and say, Trump is the problem, he's stupid and evil, right? Like that's what our parts and we as people tend to do. We call each other stupid and evil, and then that justifies our violent thoughts or actions toward others. And then there's just this cycle of violence in which we're harmed and then our parts come up and harm the other. And so I loved this idea that there's just this very small distance between feeling neutral and feeling this crucial love for the world, right? And that doesn't mean that I always have to specify to people that love does not mean that you just accept abuse, right? Or you just agree with people who are acting out in tragic ways from their parts that are feeling defensive of themselves and doing all kinds of strategies to try to get their needs met that are tragic. So it doesn't mean that we accept that. We can create distance, we can create healthy boundaries, we can say no, we can say we disagree with it. But this place of just feeling neutral toward another person, another group of people, and a part of us, to just get to the point of being a little bit open and curious, right? About why do they make sense? What happened to them? If, like Byron Katie says, if I thought the same things they did, I would do the same things they did, right? And so, again, it's not condoning what they're doing, but it's going from just this neutrality position of being open and curious to then being able to say, um, wow, I get the suffering that they must be in. And when we clearly see the suffering that someone is in, we're able to have compassion and we're able to move into love. And that doesn't mean, again, that we condone what they're doing or we agree with it at all. We can say simultaneously what they're doing is harmful, destructive, tragic. And I see why they're doing it and that they make sense. And I want them to be valued. I want them to have love and goodness and health and safety and freedom, because if they were to have that, they wouldn't need to act out in tragic ways, right? So I want good things for them. Even I don't want vengeance and violence towards them because that only fuels the whole cycle of violence. So anyway, I didn't mean to go on that little rant at the beginning. I haven't really even gotten into the book yet, but I do love that idea, right? That just feeling neutral is where we can start. And then that will kind of, like I said in one of the last videos, as we begin to develop a sense of calm, open space, if we're safe in the moment, right? Then we can begin to be just a little curious. We gain clarity about why someone makes sense, and that leads to compassion, and then it cascades into feeling confident. I feel much more confident and courageous in regard to Trump because I know that he is just a little boy who has experiencing some kind of abuse, and these are his parts that are often young as well. He can cause incredible harm, but there's a desire for him to be healed, right? Okay. So, on the first page of chapter 13, Ralph on page 149, I like how he talks about how basically many of us, our entire system is built on trying to avoid pain, right? So we're even, when we're in the self-help world or we're in the therapy world, we're just like, I'm seeking something, whether it's a magic pill or a magic practice that's going to get rid of my pain once and for all, right? And so he talks about how he had all kinds of trauma and all kinds of pain, and he sought spirituality in Buddhism. And he would meditate and he would essentially get higher than the pain. And this practice worked to kind of take him out of the pain. But it ultimately, he had to keep doing it over and over and over and over and over because he couldn't, he wasn't dealing with the roots of the pain. And then that in many circles, that's called spiritual bypassing, right? So we're not actually dealing with reality, we're getting higher than the reality. And it's actually very similar to people who have drug addiction, where they take a drug that makes them high, it gets them higher than the pain, right? So sometimes spiritual practice and meditation can be very similar to a drug that acts to get us higher than the pain. And then he also uses a term that I really love called intellectual bypassing, where we blend with our well-meaning thinking parts and we get just very cerebral, very intellectual. We're analyzing, we're thinking the philosophies and well, I don't believe in that or that, or, rationalizing, putting things together, the puzzle together. And it's really like our minds are occupied in this thinking, analyzing, intellectual space to get us out of our bodies and into our heads so that we don't feel our very real pain. Okay, so our parts, our systems organize, they're all organized around pain, the central thing of pain, right? How can I escape it, suppress it, deny it, numb it, get higher than it, push it out at others, right? All kinds of strategies. How can I avoid it? Our systems are organized around pain. And so, what Ralph explains is so different about IFS, which I agree, is that instead, and there's some Buddhist practices like this too that are later in the book that we'll talk about, but um, it's really about going toward the pain. Um, and so the way Ralph puts it on page 150 is we are looking for the experience of full-fledged open-heartedness. And he says, spiritual paradox number 374. I think they're just joking about that. But in order to open the heart, we must turn toward the very pain and confusion that we would prefer to get away from. The antidote to pain is discovered through relating to the pain itself. And this feels like a paradox to a lot of our parts whose entire strategy all of our lives is to get rid of the pain, to stop other parts that might cause pain. And so this idea of actually going toward and relating to the pain it can be difficult for them. They often need little experiments to see if it actually works. Um, and I love this statement that Ralph makes. He says, the magic is to place the pain, shame, and fear in the cradle of the open heart. I just love that image. And it's funny that Ralph calls this the good news, because as many of you know, I grew up in a religious environment. We were evangelists, which means we were, preaching the gospel, the good news. And it's funny that now the good news is much different than it was back then. It's not you are this horrible, awful, shameful sinner that deserves death and punishment forever, but you can be saved by saying this prayer and doing these things. But instead, the good news is that you have one inside of you always who can relate lovingly to all of your pain, all of your shame, all of your fear. There is nothing to fear ultimately in love. You're unconditionally loved and you cannot get it wrong. That's the good news. Um, and it also reminds me of the fact that, I often am saying that healing always occurs in this moment as we love whatever is alive in us, whatever is true, whatever arises in us in this moment, which may be excitement, it may be curiosity, but it often is sadness, fear, pain, anger. And so there's an allowance in each new moment for whatever is here. And it really is a lifestyle of relating to whatever is alive in us rather than trying to escape or suppress it. Um, and another thing that's really, I appreciate that Ralph says again on page 150 at the bottom, they say, we tend to, it's a terrible truth about us as humans that until we are cornered in some way, we tend to cruise along on autopilot. It is when the rug is pulled out from under us that we start asking real questions and looking at life with real depth. In this way, trauma can serve an incredibly adaptive purpose. And then Ralph says, I go so far as to say that the process of healing trauma could show society at large everything it needs to know to finally move toward peace and justice. And I wrote in the corner there, wow, yes. I like to write in my books. I like to interact with my books. So, and interacting with Ralph in that way. But yes, so the process that I have found of healing trauma and of really relating to my polarized parts that are warring inside of me, I think is the exact process of relating to people outside of me that are warring or having conflict, right? So often, when there are social injustices, racial injustices, violence happening in the world, all kinds of things, and people are either coming out on social media and posting a lot about it, saying things about it, or marching in the streets. I believe everyone has a role in those things, and more power to whatever you feel called to do um, in those, spaces around that. But I really believe that my calling, my part in it, is to help people understand how to relate to the parts that are warring inside of them. And that as they learn the process of healing their own trauma, each person that learns that kind of from the bottom up begins to have a sense of what it means for that to happen on a bigger scale in the world. So for me, I feel like that's my part in it. And so I'm continuing to try to be faithful to that. And just felt confirmation in that statement from Ralph. Uh, okay. So on the next page, Ralph talks a little bit about how they worked with a lot of people with addiction and a lot of trauma. And people would come in and say, I've never experienced self. I don't know what self is. Uh, because Ralph was saying they often think of it as this big, spectacular, sensational experience. And Ralph was explaining that self energy actually feels very ordinary, which made me think of the ordinary sacred, right? It really is in this place of stillness and calm. It's not sensational. It's transformational. It is the place of healing and love, but there's a deep, calm, peaceful, gently joyful, loving energy. And so people realize, oh, I actually have experienced that. I just didn't realize that that was self energy. And in many cases in trauma, there's a lot of drama, right? Drama and trauma and high energy um and so that begins to feel safer because it's comfortable or it's normal to people from trauma. And so they don't realize that it's actually in this kind of rest and digest state of the nervous system where there's calm and peace. And some of their parts are afraid to go there because it wasn't safe to go there. So you can get curious about what blocks the way, but they often realize, oh, it's actually something different than I thought. Okay. So the next section, I love because I started telling Brian about it, and he said, ooh, tell me more about that. I want to learn everything about that. He got very excited about it. Um, so Ralph on the bottom of page 151 talks about the four Brahma Viharas. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but apparently it translates as the four abodes of the gods and is commonly translated as the four immeasurables. And they are love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And often love is called loving kindness. And so in Buddhism, these are considered the natural qualities of the heart. And it's so wonderful because they really describe the self. And I'm constantly saying that people in different generations, different times, different instances are experiencing the same thing, but just calling it something different, right? Because they're trying to put words to this experience of unconditional love and compassion and joy and equanimity. And they're trying to describe the self, but uh and then people begin to take things very specifically and literally, and they fight with each other. No, it's called this, and they say, no, you must call it, it's called spirit. No, it's called Jesus. No, it's called Buddha nature. No, it's called, whatever they argue over. But they're talking about the same thing. And so I love that Ralph says, It is important to note that the heart and its infinite qualities that the Buddha discovered is the same human heart that Schwartz realized was naturally available in even his most traumatized clients. So it's the same. They're just describing the same thing. So I'll just make one note here that I appreciated, which was that the word, or I'll tell you the words, I might not say them right, but Maitri is the word for loving kindness. Karuna is the word for compassion. Mudita is I'm saying it with a Spanish accent probably, is the word for joy, which can also mean sympathetic joy, the ability to really um, sense into the happiness of others and share it with them and feel connected to them. And then upekkha, which is equanimity, which really means calm, evenness, a balance, a peace. And in my experience with myself, toward my parts, equanimity really is this ability to see the all and to see the perspective of all the parts and hold them together, that it doesn't sense that there's any enmity or competition or this versus that my parts often see. It's like, oh no, you all can be included. We all can find a way forward together. And that's kind of equanimity in my experience. Okay. Um, Okay, I'm about to go into the exercise with you. One quick thing that Ralph said that I agree with is that a key thing in internal family systems being effective is really understanding that our understanding our parts. Sorry, a key to understanding our parts is to consider them just as if they were other people. And Ralph calls them quasi people, and says the key to softening into self energy with our parts is opening our eyes to how much they are suffering and reacting to suffering, even if their initial presentation is maddeningly obstinate. And Ralph explains that to be able to see this, to be able to see the suffering and naturally have compassion on our parts, it often requires time, is what Ralph says. And this reminds me of how I would often tell people there needs to be stillness or space for nothing. And I guess that's time, right? As you spend time in with nothing, right? There doesn't have to, you don't have to fill it with anything, think up an answer, create anything. There's no right or wrong in that space, right? Just facilitating that space is what allows us to observe, I guess, the suffering of our parts or how they might be reacting and protecting us from suffering. And then as we see that, as we see the suffering, we begin to naturally feel compassion, right? When a part of me is suffering, and I'm going to tell you about my experience with the exercise in a second, I see them in front of me and I see the part of me in anguish. And I naturally feel compassion and this is why it's important to see the parts as like other people, because we often are able to feel the compassion toward other people more easily than ourselves. So if we just externalize our parts as this is like another person in front of me, it can be easier to hold compassion for their suffering. Okay. All right. That was longer than I anticipated. I hope you are still here with me to do this incredibly wonderful exercise. So, I'm first going to lead you through the traditional loving kindness meditation that many Buddhists practice. It's a beautiful exercise. And then I will just continue it on. Basically, we'll do it externally with people outside of us, and then we'll turn that lens of loving kindness toward the parts inside of us. All right. I think I'm going to not look at it because I think I know I know it mostly. Um, I do want to start. I really do love how Ralph likes to start with what he calls the fivefold foundation because he calls it an accelerant to inner healing. And it really is just letting your system know I'm moving into this space of healing and updating it that you are safe and those kinds of things. So, starting with that foundation allows us to move into the exercises with more ease. Okay, so just as a reminder, the fivefold foundation is posture, abdominal breathing, natural breathing, uh, knowing the body in space, and heart breathing. So three of those are breathing, right? And two of these are kind of our body posture and knowing our body in space. So we can do those in a matter of 30 seconds to 2 minutes. So I'll just lead you through it really quickly. First, we check our posture, and really the way I describe this, Ralph doesn't say this, but this is how I think of it. We are assuming the posture of self. So what that means is we're sitting up straight, maybe having our feet on the ground. You can do this lying down as well if your spine is supported. I like to imagine there's a little string kind of pulling up on the crown of my head. And so I have a straight spine, which represents confidence and strength, shoulders back, but then I have a soft front. I say I melt my face. My heart is soft. My belly is soft. Okay, so that's posture. And then we'll just take a couple deep abdominal breaths. So we might breathe in through our nose slowly and expand your belly as you do that. And then breathe out slowly through pursed lips. And then do that again. And out. Extending our exhale tells our body we're safe. And you can keep a soft gaze or close your eyes, whatever feels better for you. And then just notice your natural breath. So you're not manipulating your breath, you're just allowing it, the in breath, the out breath. And you might notice the space between breaths. There's such a calmness in that space. And as you continue to do that, just real quickly, notice where you are in relationship to the space of the room you're in. And even with your eyes closed, your body is aware. So you're just like, oh, I'm here in the relative space of this room. This lets your parts know that you're safe, that you're here now. If you're not safe, I invite you to really support your safety, your privacy. Okay, and then we'll begin just imagining that the breath that we've been noticing is going into our heart space and out from our heart space. And it's kind of a natural progression that we take some deep breaths, we notice our natural breath, and then we just have this intention of focusing on it coming in and out of our heart space. Okay, so that's the foundation. And from there, we're going to practice the loving kindness meditation. And I first invite you to think of a person that feels relatively easy to love for you. So it doesn't have to be a perfect relationship, but just someone you might think of a moment when you felt, they were really listening to you, they really got you, you really knew they cared for you. And just imagine that person in front of you. And if you're visual, you might see them, see their face. If you're not visual, that's okay. You might just kind of feel their energy. Or sometimes it can be helpful if you want to get a picture of them. And so just imagine that they are in front of you. And we're going to connect what we say with our breath. Okay, so the first statement, and you'll get used to this at the end of this exercise, the first statement is, may you be happy. And so as you breathe in, you can kind of say that in your mind toward that person. May you be happy. And as you breathe out, really feel what that means and imagine that energy of may you be happy going toward the person and kind of being received and absorbed by them. Okay, so may you be happy in breath. May you be happy out breath, going out to them. And then the second one is may you be healthy. I'm thinking may you be healthy, and then I'm sending it out with my out breath to the person and seeing if they can receive that. May you be healthy. And the third is may you be safe. May you be safe out toward them. And the final one is may you be free. May you be free. In breath, out breath. And I love that Ralph says there's no right or wrong here. If your parts, even with this person who's quote unquote easy to love, if it's difficult for your parts, if there's resistance or they just feel numb, that's okay. You're just doing an experiment and you can notice that and perhaps get curious about it. There's no wrong. You cannot get it wrong. Just experimenting. Okay. Now we're going to move to a stranger. So it might be someone that you don't really know, but maybe, they served you coffee, or, it was a waiter or a waitress or someone you saw on the street, maybe someone you work with, but you don't really know very well. Okay, so think of that person, a specific person, and again, imagine that they are in front of you and that they have a whole life that you don't know about. They have likely a family, they have all kinds of concerns and worries and issues that they're dealing with, and lots of joys and excitements as well. Um, just know that they are a human just like you. And we're going to do the exact same thing as you picture them or have their energy in front of you. Breathe in. May you be happy. And out toward them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. Send it to them. May you be healthy. May you be safe. Send that to them. May you be safe. May you be free. May you be free. And as you continue this practice, you will find that you can do it very quickly with any and every stranger that you meet. And you'll begin feeling more loving kindness toward everyone. Okay. Now, the third person we're going to direct this loving kindness toward is ourselves. Okay. So I invite you to imagine that you are looking at yourself. You can do this in a mirror. That's often very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but you can get to the point where you can do that. Or just imagine an image of yourself that you recently saw in the mirror in front of you, or your own energy in front of you. And I'm going to tweak this a little bit. Ralph has you say, may I be happy, may I be healthy, etc. But I want to keep it at may you be happy, may you be healthy, because what I think is really helpful, again, is considering ourselves as just another person that we are sending loving kindness toward, because many of our parts often struggle to give it to ourselves. It's a little bit easier for some people and some of our parts to give it to other people. So if we just think of ourselves and our, many selves are our parts outside of us. So you can picture yourself, or you can picture many parts if you know your parts. And just again, breathe in. May you be happy. And then send that. May you be happy. May you be healthy. Send that out. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you be safe. May you be free. Send that to yourself in front of you, your parts. May you be free. And just note how that feels to your system. Again, there's no right or wrong. When I first sent may you be happy to myself that I had seen in the mirror in the morning, I started to cry. That there was a part of me that started to say, I don't deserve to be happy. Um, and I could have compassion on that. Or if you say, may you be free, and there's a part that says, I can't be free, that feels oppressed by culture, expectations, demands, etc. See if you can have compassion on that. I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm talking about the parts, which I just always will. Okay, now finally, in this traditional form of loving kindness meditation, I invite you to think of an enemy, a quote unquote enemy. Now, Ralph, I think very wisely suggests that you not choose someone who's actively abusing you. It's in my experience, it's incredibly important to send immense loving kindness toward the parts of you that are being abused before sending it to an abuser. And we'll do that as we, send it to our parts in a second. But you might think of a person that you just had some kind of conflict with, or, you're frustrated with. And I'll tell you who I did it toward and after we do it. Okay, so just imagine that person there. And if you want to take the time and space to observe them or their energy in front of you, that might be beneficial. So you can pause to do that because, like I was saying earlier, in that space, you might see their suffering and begin to naturally feel compassion. Okay, but even if you don't, it's okay. This is just an experiment. Okay, imagine them in front of you. Um, And actually, I'm going to change the words on this one like Ralph does. Ralph changes the words toward the enemy to, may you experience the causes of happiness. Because sometimes it can be hard to say, they're doing all these destructive things. I don't want them to be happy in causing harm. But instead, what you're saying is, may you experience the causes of happiness, like which Ralph says, is healing. May you experience healing. May you experience a widening of your heart, a ability to be cracked open so that you're able to see more clearly and be with your own parts and other people and then experience happiness, right? So may you experience the causes of happiness. Okay, so let's try that. Breathe in as you're focusing on this person. May you experience the causes of happiness and breathe it out toward them. May you experience the causes of health. May you experience the causes of safety. May you experience the causes of freedom. Okay, and just notice how that experience was for you to focus on someone that might be a little bit more difficult for you to love. And now we're going to turn it toward three different parts of ourselves. Okay, so, and you can take a pause here and just come back if you want to and do a separate exercise with the inner parts, or you can continue on. Okay, so same exact thing. What I invite you to do is imagine a protector part, probably a manager part that you have some appreciation for, that is not too difficult to love, right? Like maybe it's a part that helps you get your work done at work or at home, or a part who reminds you to do certain hygiene that supports you in a certain way. Okay, so think of a manager that you appreciate, and you might begin to notice where that part is in or around your body and just observe it. What is their energy? Kind of like we did earlier, you might create some space to just observe, space and time. Just notice if they're what their energy is like, maybe what they're saying or doing. You might have an image, you might just notice where they are in or around your body. And then you begin to say, I see you. And with your breath, may you be happy. Extend that to them. May you be healthy. Extend that. And you can notice how the part reacts. May you be safe. Breathe that out. May you be free. Breathe that out to them. Again, you might notice resistance at taking it in. You might notice gratitude from the part, from being seen and loved. I'm imagining it as my breath comes out, and it's almost like I'm adding, okay, so it's like I'm adding more and more of this bubble of unconditional love that's surrounding the part. And I'm like breathing it around them. They're being held in it, like that image of being cradled in love. And even if there are some parts that are saying that this part is extreme and it doesn't need to do that and it has wrong thinking and all those things, I'm like, yes, but they deserve to be loved, and I want them to have happiness and health and freedom and safety and rest and just to be loved, to be held. Okay. Now we might try a part that might be a little more difficult to love. So if you think of a firefighter part, a part that um, maybe does an activity that is socially unacceptable. It could be one that rages at other people, or as Ralph says, um, has overly strong boundaries or something like that. Um, is very, very assertive, or maybe a part that numbs out in a certain way with a substance or an activity, maybe a self-harming part. Um, of course, don't pick the hardest part as you're experimenting, but just a part that's a little bit harder to love. And imagine the energy of that part. See if you can take a moment to notice where it is. What does it feel like in your body when that part comes online? Notice the energy. Notice anything it says or does. And again, just observe, and you can pause if you want more space to just see the motivation of this part, the energy, perhaps the suffering it's protecting. Okay. And then when you have that in front of you, or you're just focused on where it is in or around your body, you can breathe in, may you be happy. And if this feels like an enemy to you, you're welcome to say, may you experience the causes of happiness. And breathe that toward the part, just see how it reacts. There's no right or wrong. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you be free. And again, whatever your experience here, there's no right or wrong. If the part resists it, if other parts resist you doing it, just notice it. It's okay. It's good information. Okay. And finally, we are going to extend this loving kindness to a part of us who is in pain. And again, you might not want to pick the deepest trauma that you have because there might be backlash from other parts. But if in the recent past have experienced some kind of loneliness or fear or sadness or shame, you might just get in touch with that. You might remember that moment, kind of notice where you feel it in or around your body. And I love so much what Ralph says about this is as you focus on it, give it an exorbitant amount of space. Allow it to fill the room. This reminds me of how I will tell parts, you have permission to get bigger because I am bigger still. And the self, the capital L love that lives in you and exists all around you is certainly much, much bigger than the pain. And that's why the pain can come out and express itself and be held, be cradled in love. So you might imagine the loneliness or the sadness or the shame or the fear filling the whole room that you're in. And it's a loud breathing space. It's allowed to be here. And as you notice that energy, perhaps you notice the suffering, you might begin to feel genuine compassion toward that suffering. And to say, breathe in, may you be happy. Breathe it out. Let that wish for happiness fill the room. May you be healthy. Breathe it out. Let it hold the pain. May you be safe. Let it be held in that. May you be free. Breathe it out into the room. And from this space, you might just spend a moment holding the pain in loving kindness and compassion, being with the suffering. And then finally, and you can spend more time in this. I forgot to say you can journal while you're doing this. If you want to write notes, you can journal afterward about what you noticed. You can pause now and write down things if you want, if that's supportive. But finally, I want to invite you to imagine in front of you, again, whether it's visual or just the energy of the person that was kind of easy to love that you sent loving kindness toward, the stranger, yourself, just maybe a bodily image of you, the enemy that you imagined, the manager part, the firefighter part, and the exile, the pain, the part that holds pain. It's almost like they're lined up in front of you. You can see all of them. And collectively, you can say, may you all be happy. May you all be healthy. May you all be safe. And may you all be free. I really like this exercise of putting them all together because it really is like the self, love, capital L love, capital S self, can hold everyone and every part in love and have loving intention. That doesn't mean you want them to be harmful. Actually, when they have all those things, when they know they're loved, when they have the causes of happiness and health and safety and freedom, they don't need to act out. It is the way forward for peace inside and outside. So I know this video is getting quite long. Um, you can watch it in parts if you want. Of course, you can do whatever you want to do. I do want to tell you just briefly about my experience with the inner exercises with my parts because I thought it was really interesting. Oh, I also was going to tell you that for my enemy, I did choose Trump, and it was really interesting. Um, and I thought, yeah, that if he had the causes of happiness, safety, health, and freedom, he wouldn't act out. It would be a win-win. So of course I want that. Okay. So the easy manager that I noticed was uh yesterday morning at the hotel. They didn't have food that I can eat, and my system got really agitated and overwhelmed. I had a bit of a meltdown, and um, as someone with HSP and on the spectrum, I have a lot of uh, needs physically, mentally, emotionally, that it feels like I have more needs than other people do. And so I had this part, this manager part, that was like, if I was just alone, if I was just by myself, I could take care of all my needs and that would be better. And it explained to me that it was saying this because, not because, I mean, Brian is incredibly attentive and loving and non-shaming, um, but I've had this history of a host, what I would call an army of inner critics that would berate me and tell me how terrible I was whenever I had these needs and these sensitivities and limited capacities because because of particularly how it affected the people around me, that I was limiting them, I was a burden on them, I was a problem. And these critics were trying to keep me acceptable socially, to keep me alive. I understood their good intention. But the difficult thing was I could not do what the critics were wanting me to do. I couldn't make my capacity greater. I couldn't make my sensitivity lower, I guess. Um, I couldn't push beyond my physical capacities, right? And so the critics were just constantly hounding me, even very harsh, murderous, suicidal critics, right? So that was just so much turmoil in my system. So this manager started coming out and saying, well, if we're just alone, then we don't have to worry because the critics don't come out when I'm alone because they're all related to how they think I'm affecting other people, right? So if I'm alone and I can take care of my needs, then the critics don't come out. So this manager was really trying to protect me from the critics coming out. And I was able to just send so much love and appreciation to this part and then to say, what if, like kind of an experiment, what if we act as if we're alone while we're with other people? Like, what would I do if I were alone? How would I take care of myself if I were alone? Because, I need this. And it was funny because later, Brian told me, well, can you take care of yourself as if you're alone? Kind of pretend like you're alone and you're just going to care for yourself because I also want you to be able to care for yourself. And I want your parts to know I'm not put out, you're not a burden to me, all those great things. And I've often said that I'm completely drained when I'm around other people. And it's because of this. It's because my system is so hypervigilant around about how I'm affecting people negatively because I have such low capacity. However, I don't experience it so much around Brian. I would say being with Brian feels like I'm alone, which sounds terrible, but it's the biggest compliment in the world, right? Because he accepts me for who I am and doesn't shame me for my limited capacities and stuff. So, but anyway, so I was just showing appreciation to that part. And then the firefighter part that I chose was funny because it was inspired by Ralph saying, maybe it's a part that's a little too good at boundaries. And I remember last week when we were with my mom, she was trying to do all these things for other people that they didn't they didn't want. And a part of me came out and said, you can't care about other people more than they care about themselves. But it was this very assertive part, and it was like pushing like this. And I realized that those words, you can't, were activating for my mom's system. And then she had a protector that came out and it aggressively in response, right? So it was clearly a part of me. And the energy of it was like this. And it was saying, you can't care for other people more than they care for themselves. And it was trying to speak truth. And it was trying to do, set kind of a boundary. But it was a little bit of an aggressive, assertive energy that, of course, was then not, was met with a counter force. Um, so it was funny as I began noticing the energy of this part and the pushing and the trying to speak truth. I was like, "Oh, hi, Sebastian." I understood. Oh, I know this part. This is Sebastian, and I feel so much affection and appreciation for Sebastian. So that was able to just send loving kindness to Sebastian, and that was beautiful. And then finally, the exile. Yesterday, when my parts, basically the part was saying, we if we're just alone, then we don't have to worry about the critics coming out. And I realized that what that part was protecting was afterward, when I was talking to Brian, tears started coming up, and it's this part that holds this residual feeling of if I have these needs and I put other people out, I'm a burden, I'm shameful, I'm too sensitive, I'm too much or not enough, or, you know, um, I've always been a burden, I'm bad, I, cause problems for people, that kind of thing. And so I was able to just let that part feel the pain of that and realize that is very painful to feel that. And you're allowed to express that. And you can fill this whole room. We were in this big lobby, right? So the part filled the whole room. And it just felt so relieving for that part to be validated of yeah, it feels really painful. Many of you know my first husband, his protective parts were very harsh and shaming and cruel to my parts that had limited capacity. So some of my inner critics have taken on that energy. And so my parts are afraid of they don't have that at all in Brian now, but because some of the inner critics have they're very, very I have a part telling me, Christine, don't go into every detail. This video is already too long. It's okay. Well, it's okay. I'm telling you. I'll just say this last thing. Um, th because I do think it's important if you're still listening to this, that my inner critics were so big for the longest time. I could not figure out how really to unburden them. I gave them so much appreciation. I could see how they were trying to help me and fit in socially. It genuinely was not until very recently when I began to really identify as being level 1 on the autism spectrum that I began to really understand that this is how my system is, and I can't change it. And once my system began to accept that it was something that could not be changed, my critics began to relax because they were working under this assumption that if we just berate you and threaten you and shame you, you'll whip into shape and you'll have a higher capacity and you won't be as sensitive. So helping them understand it's it's just not going to work. It just can't work. I know it hasn't worked so far. And this is why, because this is just who we are. And um, they have really relaxed. So in this case, yesterday, it didn't feel really, really big. It felt like kind of this residual, we still need to be reminded of it a little bit, right? Because we're so used to jumping in and even actually the critics didn't even come in. it was just this part was still afraid of them. And I kind of had to remind her, the one that was saying it'd be better if I was alone, you remember that they have been really, really calm and quiet since identifying as autistic. And she was like, yeah, that's true. But I've had such a history with them and they cause so much turmoil in the system. I don't know if I can trust that they won't come in. Right. So it's just kind of updating her. And I did tell the part that was feeling like I'm a burden when I have needs. I just said, I'll be here and I'll take care of you. And Brian is a pretty good secondary caregiver too. Right? And I asked them, have you seen that? Have you seen evidence of that? And they said, yes, yes, that's true. So sometimes it's just gentle reminders to the parts. Okay, thanks for listening. If you are here this far, um, I would say if you have listened this far, go ahead and just put any kind of heart in the comment section as an emoji to signify that you have listened to the end. Um, as we have talked about loving kindness really for every person and every part of you. I think this is a beautiful, beautiful practice. Again, if your parts resist it, that's okay. See if you can get curious about why. And you might try it a couple more times and see if things change or not. Maybe it's not a practice that's helpful for you, and that's okay too. You can experiment and find what is. And thank you so much for spending this time with me and with your parts and just extending loving kindness. I guarantee you that it will change the world if you practice this regularly. Could you imagine if every person practiced this regularly, how different the world might be? So, okay, see you next time.